Perry, he considered that Egyptians are nothing but children of sun god, and now these people traveled across the world, and the spread of the idea of sun god worship also happened. So he considered that Egypt as the center of civilization, and that spread to other places. So that is with respect to Perry. Then you have W.H.R. Rivers. So Rivers, he is a psychiatrist basically, but he was a fieldwork volunteer. For what? For conducting fieldworks in India, in Melanesian islands. So Todas of Tamil Nadu has been studied by him. So while he was traveling, so Torres Strait expedition is something which you will come across when we study the fieldwork evolution. So there you'll notice that in that Torres Strait expedition, he comes across these places and he studies in that travel. So he gave up initially. He was supporting the classical evolutionists, and he was doing this support, but later on he gave up classical evolutionism and he became diffusionist in the last phase of his life. So his version is different from Smith and Perry, Eliot Smith and Perry. So as per him, there are multiple centers of origin, not just one center. Okay. You can notice these things, that there are many centers, and diffusion is a local process and it is not global process. Fieldwork is an important tool to find out the path of diffusionism. Don't sit there and discuss everything. Fieldwork is an important tool to do it. And he considers dilution of a culture is part of diffusion. So these are the basic premises. And how is it different? Here they say that what is the role of anthropologist? You find in which way it went. The diffusion, in which path did it happen? You unravel it. That is the role. They also believed that dilution happens with respect to time and space. Okay. He agreed to them, but he disagreed that single center, multiple centers. Okay. So diffusion, they consider it as a global process. He considered it as a local process. And they believed in finding the path, but they did not do the field work. But he has said that field work has to be done. Okay. So what is their approach? You study all the cultural traits from the center of civilization, observe whether the same things are present in other cultures, other parts of the world. That you have to do, and then reverse, he said, you do the field work to find out the spread of the culture through diffusion. Right. So this is the approach, and then criticism. First, Smith and Perry, again, they have been ethnocentric. They learned only Egyptian civilization. They did not look at other civilizations only. From that only you have concluded everything. No evidence to prove the process. Whole theory was imagination from their end. So wrong assumptions has been made about equal ability of inventiveness of mankind. You don't know whether equal or unequal. You should not make a comment about it. And you are talking about only material culture, what you are looking. What about the ideas, thoughts, beliefs? So this is the criticism to British school. Did you understand? Or should I repeat any part of British school? So reverse simply says that do the field work, not one center, multiple centers. It is local process, not a global process. You should focus on field work also. So this is the only thing, the difference you notice. Rest too, I think I have explained it in detail, right? Then you have American School of Diffusionism, which is also known as cultural crease or culture circle theory. It's called as culture crease, means culture circle. So the thinkers related to it is Schmidt, then you have Fritz Grabner, Leo Frobenius. Leo Frobenius, Grabner and Schmidt. The difficulty in diffusionism thought for students is not the concept but their names. Right? You have too many names, not the concept. Concept they explain is very simple. So what are the basic premises? Now one thing, they rejected extreme diffusion, that means one center, multiple centers, and the culture trait spreads like ripples of water. Culture trait spreads like ripples of water. So that is also that is known as culture circle. That's why we give the name culture circle theory, because it is spreading like ripples. So it's spreading in circles, right? So culture circle theory. So what they say is that one must analyze diffusion with respect to time and space. So with time, how the diffusion is happening, and with the space. Here they say that you should not imagine anything. So since you cannot imagine anything, you want to take proof, evidence. So then what you should focus? You should focus on the materialistic aspect, or else you go for imagination. So they said there should not be any conjecturalism, rather there should be evidence based observation for diffusion process. So though they want to demonstrate both material and non-material, but the importance should be more on the materialistic aspect. Right? These are the premises of Austro-German school. So I told you they gave the criteria of quality and criteria of quantity. Right? So first you notice Fritz Grabner has given this. So Fritz Grabner in the work, you can note down the work. Method, the ethnology. So METH method, method DE method DER space DER space ethnology. So this is in German, and in English you call it as method of ethnology. So in this work, he utilized both criteria to recognize the culture circles in Oceania region. Oceania, you know, right? Right? In the Oceania region, he tried to use these two criteria. Okay? So Grabner believed that a limited number of cultural circles developed throughout the human history. And all the cultures at present and in the past resulted from the diffusionism. So he believed that in the initial stages there are some culture circles. So in the initial stages, in the past, in the start of human history. Now what all you see, these culture circles are result of diffusion only. So that means they spread from there to other. So initially when the origin happened, so in the initial part of in the history of mankind, there were some cultural circles at that point of time. Now what happens? This will spread to here, this will spread to here. So now whatever the culture circles you are noticing, the new ones, they are nothing but they are the result of diffusionism or diffusion of traits from these culture circles. So now what new circles you have, new culture circles you have, they are the result of diffusion of traits of old circles. Clear? So this is what he tries to say. He concentrated on similarities in cultural traits across Oceania and divided it into 6 culture circles. Tasmanian culture circle, which he considered as the oldest one. Then Australian boomerang. Then he sees horticulturist and totemic hunter-gatherers, Melanesian bow culture, Polynesian patrilineal culture. So he classifies into 6. You don't worry about what are those. But what he is trying to say, try to understand what he is trying to say. Fritz Grabner, he uses the criteria of form and criteria of quantity to understand. So what he says is that in the method of ethnology work, he tries to say that in the beginning of history of mankind, there were some culture circles that were present, and now what you see or you have seen in the past, they are result of the diffusion of cultural traits in between these earliest culture circles. Okay, now whatever is there, that is result of diffusion only, and he studies the Oceania region, and in the Oceania region he tries to divide them into cultural circles and he classifies into 6. Clear? Culture circles. Culture circles only. So he believed that early man invented the basics of culture, that like language, tool making, and these formed some small bands. In the initial times, people used to live in small bands, which were isolated from other, and these bands developed their distinct cultures. And then they spread in different directions and finally into the different continents of the world. This was the understanding of Grabner. Okay, then you have Smith. So here criteria of form and criteria of quantity you should know. So criteria of form means you take two cultural elements, okay, bit of you take two different cultures and you take two cultural elements, and if you are not able to tell that this is made because of a material or purpose or nature, then if you are not able to tell for what reason it is made, then that particular cultural element or cultural trait is diffused. If you are not able to tell why it has come, what is the reason or the nature or the material, if you are not able to explain, then that is because of diffusion. They say that not all cultural traits are diffused, but they say that if you have to identify a particular one, if you are not able to give the reasons, then that particular trait is diffused. So one can say with certainty that similarities are not because of diffusion if you find the nature or the reason for it. If you are not finding the reason for it or if you are not finding the material for it, then with confidence you can say that it is because of diffusion, irrespective of distance. So this is what they try to talk about. So before concluding diffusion is the reason, you eliminate all other reasons. First you give for what reason it has come. If you are not able to give any reason, then diffusion is the reason for that particular cultural trait. Okay, so bow arrow with red thread tied at the middle in Africa and American Indians, not in India. Okay, so between Africans and American Indians, they notice this. So criteria of form. Then criteria of number. So criteria of number means that you take two cultural traits, material traits mainly, and in that material traits, if you have too many similarities between them, then that means it is because of diffusion. So this is criteria of number. So they try to look at both the criteria together and they try to analyze. So using that only, I try to talk about the Fred Grabner's idea in the method of ethnology. There he tried to talk about the culture crease using these two concepts. He classified the culture circles of Oceania using these two criteria. Okay, then you have William Smith, right? So they gave these concepts of criteria of form and criteria and quantity, but they applied this also to study in various places. Even William Smith, okay, William Smith also classifies the world, culture of the world into four major circles. So primitive culture circle associated with hunting gathering, and other primary cultural circle associated with domestication of animals and shifting cultivation. Secondary, so first is primitive, second is primary, third is secondary. Secondary you will have intensive agriculture, tertiary is with civilization. He classifies into four culture circles, whereas Grabner into six, but he has done it within Oceania. Smith is doing it in the world cultures and classified it into four based on first hunting gathering, then domestication, then agriculture, then civilization. Primitive, primary, secondary and tertiary. And he also talked about, William Smith also talked about evolutionary theory of religion proposed by Taylor. He disagreed with the Taylor. According to him, monotheism was the most primitive form of religion. Because he believed that earliest primitive people used to worship one, one god as their ancestors, as their father. So that was the earliest stage. Monotheism was the earliest. Later addition of other gods and spirits that led to the birth of polytheism. So this was the view of Smith. But again, you have empirical evidence to prove it. And how do you establish culture circle? You didn't tell any method how to establish a culture circle. You used imagination. You said you should not use imagination. Again, you used the imagination. You said you should analyze both material and non-material and give more importance to material. But you did only material aspect. You did not explain non-material aspect anywhere. So these are the criticisms that you notice. So the conclusion is the rise of alternative perspectives like American school of diffusionism, which emphasized on the detailed historical analysis, has led to the decline of German school. So what led to its decline? Because the next school has come which tried to analyze the historical aspects. So that is American school of diffusionism. So I gave the difference table also, so that tomorrow if they ask what is the difference between British school and German school, so these are the things that you have to use to write the answer. Okay, so very simple. Diffusionism, this is extreme, they are not extreme, they are talking about multiple origins, and the culture crease concept. So center, one center, multiple. Imagination, the most used, commonly used, here they have less used. approach, just you look for similarity criteria of form and number. There, what is your role? To find the path of diffusion. Here you should show how the diffusion happened using the criteria of form and number. Okay, you should demonstrate, but here just you find the path. So how did it go? You are just, but how did it happen? You don't bother. How did it go? In which path it followed? Here you should demonstrate how the diffusion is happening. Why? In which way? Again, same thing. You write about it. That's it. So you can go through later, but you should also know the differences between them. So then coming to American school. Be a bit loud. Using that they have said, you will take two traits and you will see the shape, material, everything. If there is no relation between that, so you cannot tell what reason it has been made, then that is because of diffusion. That is criteria of quality or form. Number means how many similarities are there. If there are more similarities, then that means it is diffuse. Culture circles, not cultures. They have classified because they have multiple cultures, but they have put them into 6 culture circles. How do you divide it into culture circle? So they believe that cultural trait originated in one place, it spread like a ripples. So they have classified them into culture circles. So now American school believe that people tend to learn and borrow elements of culture. They come in contact with other people. So when will you learn from other people? Or when will you borrow from other people? When you are in contact for long time and when you are meeting regularly. So through that they have proposed the concept of cultural area. Cultural area means, I told you, it is a geographical space in which similar cultural traits are found. Cultural area is the one where you notice similar cultural traits. So now the basic proposition was that mapping of distribution of cultural traits in cultural areas would provide explanation of similarities and differences between cultures. So now you have cultural area. Within that, what you have to do is, you have to map the distribution of cultural traits, how it is distributed. Now this will help in explaining the difference between one culture and the other culture, because here you will see within the culture area, you are mapping the cultural traits and you are trying to observe the similarities and dissimilarities, and then through that you will tell whether the diffusion has happened or not. So they are not concerned whether this diffusion happened all over the world or not, but they are concerned about diffusion present in the smaller geographical regions. So don't make it complex, try to keep it simple, that these people have tried to understand how the diffusion is happening in the smaller area. What they said? They said, you will borrow something when you meet people frequently, and for longer duration when you are in contact, then you will borrow, right? Now when in this process, what happens, the trait spreads. So now there is one culture, there is other culture, they are coming in contact with each other. Then if you have to observe the diffusion process, then what you will do, within these two cultures, these are the two culture areas because they have similar traits and everything. Now within this, you will take one particular cultural trait and you will map. And here also you will map. You will check the similarities. Then based on that, you will say that how and when what happened the diffusion process. This is what they are using basically. So you can look at it. You have Whistler, Clark Whistler and Krober. So both of them were against the use of three group classifications that has been done by savagery, barbarism and civilization. And instead they suggested geographical area based grouping of artifacts and antiquities, because then the grouping was done based on the archaeological findings. So here they said geographical area based grouping, and Whistler found that there is a similarity among the cultural elements which are belonging to the same geographical area. If they are belonging to same geographical area, then you notice the similarities in the artifacts that are been found. Right. So he predicted diffusion as a reason behind this similarity and developed the culture area, age area approach to study these predictions. So whatever evolutionists have said, they rejected. They said this classification is not better. You classify geographically, and he said that they have similarities because of diffusion. So better use the concepts such as culture area and age area to do or understand this predictions. So what are the basic premises? So people imitate, borrowing is easier than inventing. If you have necessity, you will adopt it. Diffusion of traits is more common in a geographical area. If you are there in one area, traits will easily diffuse. So he said use the culture area approach to study diffusion. Right? You have different cultures, but you have similarities. So if you have to understand that, what you have to use, you should use the culture area approach. So Whistler has studied 300 tribes from North America. He divided the North America into ecozones. So he took a particular cultural trait and he has classified. Fish zone, you have wild seeds, intensive agriculture, deer, bull, maize. So based on this, he classified the geographical areas. Clark Whistler was a student of Franz Boas. Okay, Franz Boas is the anthropologist which you will be studying, very important anthropologist. Okay. So he was dissatisfied with the evolutionist view, and who treated the American Indian population as if they are uniform and undifferentiated. Okay, so that he didn't like, and he was clear that there is differentiation between these people, and classifying somebody as dominant and somebody as inferior, he did not like this approach, and he said if you have to classify, you should use the traits and what traits are dominating in that area, and accordingly you classify those culture areas. But that is not the classification that you have to do hierarchically. Okay, so this he has studied and he has given the concept that larger area, older, if the spread is in the large area. So I showed you, right? He has given the concept of culture area. If the trait spread to large area, then the diffusion happened since long time. If it is spreading to the smaller area, then that means diffusion happened recently. See, don't get confused with what I said in the last example. Last example I gave with respect to similar cultural trait. Ah, so you should understand that if a pen originated here, it went till here, and pen went till here. So this is younger, this is older because it happened long back. But here you need to understand what they are trying to give the age is that if you notice whatever the terminology that is used there, larger area, older diffusion of a older diffusion of a age of a culture trait. Okay, smaller age area, recent diffusion. They are talking about different traits. This is pen. You take a book. If the book has to move from here to here in this large area, that means it will take so much of time to spread till there. That means they are not talking about this, they are talking about the origin. When did it happen? It happened long back. So that means to come till here, it took long time. That's why they are calling it as older area of diffusion. If it took only less time, that means this invention happened recently. Don't get confused. This is in 2000. It took to come here. That means it took 20 years to travel. It took only 5 to 10 years to travel because it is less. That means this is today we are in 2020. What 5 to 10 years means it is in 2015. Origin, when did it happen? It happened recently, right? It is latest. Not clear. Let me explain. See, that's good that sometimes you should have this confusion because everything, if you understand, also it's a problem. Right. See, origin, when did it happen? When did it happen? This is the center. This is the center. So this radius is 5 kilometers and this radius is 10 kilometers. Now this area is small, and to spread to this area it will take less time. So now this is here the trait you are observing is in 2025. Here also you are observing it in 2025. So this is the book, this is the pen. Both you are observing in 2025, right? So it has come 10 kilometers till 2025. It has come only 5 kilometers till 2025. That means when that cultural trait would have been originated or invented. This is very long back, right? And this recently. So this is older area of diffusion, where this is newer area of diffusion. Clear? When it is large, that is old. But there what I have told you is, this is young and sorry, this is young, this is old. When I talk about the same thing, suppose here I am talking about the pen only. So here this has come recently, this has come long back, if you are looking at it. So that comparison we have done in the past. Don't get confused with what we have discussed. We were talking only with one one trait. Here if you are trying to observe the older area or newer area in two places, if you are trying to observe in two places, this is newer area, this is older area, it depends upon the area that it has occupied. Again, do not get confused. We were talking with respect to age, which is young and which is old. So, what we were discussing in the beginning, let's try to clarify what we have discussed once again. What we have discussed in the beginning is that there is a trait that is present here. Since how many years it is present here? And there is a trait that is present here since how many years it has present there. So if you see, it is since very less number of years, but here it is since many years. So that's why we called it as older, this is younger. But when it comes to area classification, larger will become the older one, smaller will become the younger one. So there we were talking about the individual age, trait age. But here we are talking about the time span taken to spread. How much time did it take to spread? So it will take more time, it will take less time. So that means this is younger, this is older. So this is newer, this is older. I think now you are clear. There we are talking about the age. So construction of age area, larger area, older age of diffusion, age, we are talking about diffusion age. We are not talking about the trait age. We are talking about the diffusion age. So here it is older and there it is recent diffusion. Small area means it happened recently. So this is recent, that is long back. So though they use the better and practical approach, there are some grounds on which they have been identified the flaws. So Whistler demonstrated only one criteria. But when culture areas you construct, so this is culture area. You are telling only one criteria to do that culture area, but when you construct it, will you have only one cultural trait in it? Cultural trait is the smallest part. You will have thousands and thousands. How are you going to deal with that? That is the first criticism you will be observing. Okay? Culture area is where the similar culture or similar cultural traits are present. So area which occupies the similar cultural traits. You see all the similar cultural traits and you draw a geographical area, that becomes a culture area. But now you are trying to do further classifications within the culture areas. So you are mapping the cultural traits. You are taking one pen or you are taking one color of skin and you are trying to map them, who are all having the grayish or dark brown skin. So you are mapping them. But when you go, you have multiple varieties of it, right? You don't have only skin all there, you have multiple varieties of them. So how are you going to map them? You are talking about only one criteria. When cultural areas are constructed based on two or many criteria, if you are constructing on one, if you are taking specific color and if you are constructing, you will be doing it. But if you are taking two or three, they'll overlap. In one area you will notice two colors, in other area you will notice other two colors, in other area you will notice other two colors. So they'll overlap. So in that case, what needs to be done? Suppose in the previous one, you said salmon fish in this area and you said wild seeds in this area. But there are areas where you have both. Now what about that overlapping area? In which culture area are you going to put it? And this is not applicable worldwide also. Right? Whistler was uncertain about the wideness of the culture area, to what extent you can draw that culture area. And at the same time, it cannot be used in the social stratification. So cultural approach, cultural area approach cannot be used in societies where there is social stratification. Because if you take Indian society, if you are trying to say that because a particular trait is present, it is not present in all the areas because all the areas are not rich equally. So you might be seeing that art forms being placed in the homes, but you may not notice it in the rural villages because they cannot equally afford those such art forms to be placed. So based on that trait, if you are trying to judge or map, that means you are not doing it properly because you don't have an idea that who is having within that particular culture. If there is social stratification, somebody will have it, somebody will not have it. So when there is social stratification, and now they are all present in one area only. If you are trying to map, then some people who are having might be concentrated or diffused. How are you going to do it? These in between you don't have. In one corner these people have it, these people have it. So how are you going to map that? You cannot use this culture area approach where there is social stratification. You have to do the geographical mapping. But if it is diffused at different places and it is not present in many of the areas because of social stratification, then mapping becomes difficult. Is it clear? You cannot map if there is social stratification. So that cultural area mapping becomes difficult. So again, at world level you cannot apply it, and here emphasis is mostly made on the material culture. Stratification, okay, I'm sorry. First I should explain that term. What is social stratification? That means in caste you have high caste, low caste, right? So in the similar manner, rich and poor. So just like you have strata. So in geography you have strata, right? Layer after the layer. So you are arranging layers one above the other. In the similar manner, in society if you arrange people in layers, one is above, one is below, then that is called as social stratification. So when you have social stratification, everybody cannot have access to everything. Only few people have access, and where they are placed. So cultural traits vary from people to people. So they all belong to same culture, but cultural traits may not be present among all the people. Now how do you map it? It becomes very difficult. Okay. So Whistler talked about the age area principle. A cultural trait originates at the center. It spreads with equal speed in all directions. The trait that spread to long distance, that means the diffusion started long back and the area that it covered is older area of diffusion. And the trait which spread only small distance, that means the diffusion started recently and this is the recent area of diffusion and this is newer and younger. Clear, right? Very simple. And you cannot use this classification where there is stratification. You cannot map, and world level it is not applicable. You focus more on the material, you didn't focus on the non-material aspect. Then you have A.L. Kroeber. His theory is called as birth and death of civilization. See, initially a culture is open to receive everything. Okay, so you keep on borrowing whatever you need, you keep on borrowing, you develop over a period of time. Cultural traits accumulate, your knowledge accumulates. Cultural traits is nothing but everything, right? So it can be knowledge, practices, experiments, everything. So you borrow, keep on borrow, you exchange, and you develop. So you reach to the most complex stage. Then what happens? You become adamant and you don't accept anything new, you reject. When you start rejecting, that is your climax. Your cultural development collapses. So when you reach, when your culture becomes complex, it becomes civilization. So what happens at that point of time? You stop receiving things and it collapses. So the highest stage where you start rejecting the cultural traits from outside, that stage is known as cultural climax. So how the civilizations take birth and death. So this concept you can write in your answers of civilization when you come across the topic in 2.1. So you can see every culture at the beginning borrows, but later they become arrogant to incoming cultures. Then it leads to rigidity in culture. Then no further development. There is stagnation. Before LPG reforms in India, there was stagnation. Manufacturing unit, manufacturing sector, all other sectors. There is no development because everything is being done by government. There is no competition. When you become complacent that okay, everything is going for government is taking it, nobody is interested in innovation and invention. There is no competition. So there was fall in the production and everything in the economy altogether. So then the LPG reforms were introduced, right? So when you become arrogant to other incoming cultural traits, this arrogance leads to rigidity and death of civilization. And this concept is later used by Robert Redfield and McKim Marriott, which we will be studying in paper 2. Okay? Simple. Initially, you will take traits till the time you are mature. Slowly, when you become mature, you start rejecting, you'll become arrogant. So when you become arrogant, your development will become stagnant because same technology will be there. You don't try to invent much. If you are borrowing, you will get many new inventions, new inventions. But if you are not borrowing, only one thing you will work upon, which will not satisfy all the needs. So then slowly things will depreciate. How can you take Andaman Nicobar tribal? That is very different thing because if you were also a tribe, they might be open to it. But since you are from a different world altogether, that is new cultural shock to them. That is a different thing. Maybe if there were original islanders who were residing there, then they might have been in contact. Today they have remained isolated. So we don't know, we cannot judge them now. So that's why you cannot use that example. Okay. So this is with respect to diffusion theory. So that's it. We are done with diffusionism. So I'll give some explanation in addition to what is there in the syllabus so that sometimes if a question is asked, then you will be able to write. So don't worry about the notes part because I'll be giving you an audio note of all these things which you should write as a notes because here explanation is different, but when you write it, then that should be in proper, what do you call, phrasing of sentences. So that I'll be providing. Okay, so don't worry about that, but you should understand it. If you have understood, then phrasing of sentences and that content I'll provide what you have to present in your notes. Okay, what? Within the culture area you have multiple cultural traits. So now which cultural trait you're mapping? So that part I was showing that. Okay, suppose you take one cultural trait within the culture. What is culture area? Area which is having similar cultural traits or similar culture is known as culture area. So within the culture you have multiple traits. So now you are taking one criteria and you are mapping it. So that's why we are criticizing him, right? If you take two, then it will overlap. Then how are you going to deal it? Whistler. Whistler, culture area concept was given by Whistler. Clark Whistler. You don't have Smith in it. Okay? Yeah.